Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the first bill, Senate Bill 1115, repeals the legislation passed 2 years ago that reclassified women's health care centers where abortion services are provided as hospitals. That legislation required these centers to comply with onerous, expensive, and medically unnecessary regulations. The new regulations are not supported by recommendations from Virginia's top medical experts, and Virginians have overwhelmingly commented in opposition to them. Moreover, the result of the legislation from 2 years ago is that some of these centers are not going to be able to stay open, or they'll have to limit services. That puts women's health and safety in jeopardy, and that's wrong.
We are in support of both of these bills strongly because first trimester abortions remain one of the safest and most common of all in-office surgical procedures. Abortion should not be regulated differently than other outpatient procedures that do not trigger the kinds of strict regulations we have seen applied to women's health centers in Virginia. Laws that target only abortion providers, such as the bill passed in 2011, have nothing to do with the safe delivery of services for women and everything to do with efforts to restrict access to reproductive health care. Women's health centers that provide a full range of comprehensive health care services could close because of an inability to meet regulations that have nothing to do with women's health and safety.
There is no evidence that abortions in the state have been unsafe. There is absolutely none of that. And the chairpersons of the departments of OBGYN in the state have reiterated that.
Hi, my name is Vicki Ryan, and I'm here as somebody that works at one of the 3 local women's health clinics here in Richmond. Honestly, I can't even believe that I'm standing up here. I feel kind of like at this point I have to stare at you all and I have to beg for my job. Because honestly, with these classifications, putting in women's health clinics, regulating them as hospitals with these building code regulations, you know, our major concern at the clinic I work at is to provide health care, to provide reproductive services. Our major concern is not the size of our parking lot. It just isn't. It's not the size of our janitor closet. You know, we have a wonderful closet we can fit a mop bucket in. And I'm really ashamed that I have to stand up here and plead for my job, but you do realize that there are 18 clinics that are not going to be able to get the type of funding to rebuild their clinics to the size and the stature of a full-blown hospital. This has never been required on clinic centers in the history of the Board of Health, and I just strongly urge you all to support this legislation and pass it because it's what's right and what's fair. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is it Vicky?
Senator Garrett?
Is it Vicky? Is that right?
Vicki.
Vicky, do you work at Capital Women's Health Clinic?
Yes, sir, I do.
And are you familiar with the announced and publicized advance notice given review of the sanitary and medical facilities at that clinic in June of this past year?
Yes, sir, I was there.
Okay, and so then you know that the findings were that sponge use to clean those rooms was only cleaned once a week?
Sir, we're not arguing the regulations of the clinic. Yes, those are necessary, and we agree that regulations that are for the safety of our patients. We're talking about, I am specifically talking about the requirements that label health centers as hospitals, and thus the building code regulations put on them.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Garrett?
And well, I mean, you know, obviously, there's a medical procedure that's done at your facility. Are you also familiar with the fact that roughly a third of your employees have access to controlled substances without being licensed by the Board of Pharmacy?
No, sir, we ensure that, you know, we take the necessary precautions, and if that was found, that was immediately corrected.
And also, that there was at the time.
Follow this question, Senator Garrett. I want to ask that we all hold our questions.
This doesn't have anything to do with the hospital code, building code regulations. That's what my main point is.
Let's see how the question gets targeted, and I'll make that judgment. Are you refusing to answer?
No. What?
Did you withdraw your question?
Mr. Chairman, there were a number of deficiencies cited. I'll withdraw the question.
Okay.
I'll be happy to discuss it if that comes up.
Thank you.
I am not opposed to regulations that protect the safety of patients, inspections All regulations that are in violation must be corrected. As the good senator was pointing out, what is entirely unacceptable are the building code regulations, because I challenge anyone here to tell me that the size of the parking lot, the width of the corridors, the number of lockers makes a difference in the safety of these women.
We are not opposed to regulation. We work to ensure the highest quality of care at all of our health centers. But we do believe that these regulations as imposed are onerous and unnecessary, and they don't speak to directly improving the quality of care provided to our patients.
For over a decade, the abortion industry claimed that no health and safety standards were necessary, and it fought against, and let me remind you of this in light of the testimony that we just heard, the very year that the legislation passed that brought these regulations, there was a bill before this very committee that would have required only licensing, inspection, and emergency equipment in abortion centers. And the very people that testified today that they favor regulations fought against that legislation. The discovery of widespread violations of health and safety standards in Virginia's abortion centers during Department of Health inspections this year tells us why they fought this. Department of Health records, initial announced inspections, in other words, the abortion centers knew the inspectors were coming and thought they were prepared. Over 100 health and safety standard violations were found in Virginia's 20 abortion centers, including blood splatter on medical equipment, blood splatter on procedure tables, multiple incidents of equipment that was not sanitized properly, untrained staff, lack of oversight of drones, medical equipment in disrepair. I could go on. There are well over 100. An industry that has covered up these kind of problems for 2 decades does not deserve to be listened to on how it should be regulated. Now the industry claims that because their centers were licensed, they've always been safe. It is important to note that licensing came only after they submitted plans to correct all of their deficiencies we never would have known about if it had not been for this legislation. No one has said that these facilities cannot continue to offer other preventative services if they so choose. They have to make a choice whether or not they're going to meet these standards to perform abortions. If they choose not to, they can continue to do all of the other services they claim to provide. We believe this legislation is necessary, what was passed 2 years ago, and we would urge you to defeat these bills today. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, quick question.
Yes. Senator Roll.
Yes, Chris, just very quick, and I appreciate your testimony. I do a procedure in my office called a lumbar puncture, spinal tap, which is where we place the needle at the bottom of the spine. If it's done improperly, it could paralyze the person. Could you comment on which is more risky, a spinal tap done in my office or an abortion?
Well, if your equipment isn't blood splattered, probably yours.
Mine is riskier?
Well, no, I'm saying that if your equipment is not blood splattered, yours is probably a safer procedure based on what is there, the equipment. Maybe the procedure, in your opinion, is more dangerous. But, Dr. Northam, your facilities, you meet some standards that may not be regulated by the state, but by your industry.
Mr. Friend, are you a physician?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so I just don't think, I think your answer's fine, but the people who testify before us are offering their views to things and
Right, but a follow-up question and I'll be
Yes,
finished. If I could tell you that the chances of paralyzing the person are risky, dangerous, am I next? Is my clinic there?
Dr. Rosen, if you had a record, if your industry had a record of over 100 health and safety
I asked the
violations,
question, am I next?
I think that the General Assembly would have a responsibility to look into your industry if there was a discovery of all of these different incidents. We have an industry that has over 100 health and safety violations. You can look the other way if you would like to. I don't think the people of Virginia want you to.
I would just like to point out that for building regulations, we regulate public buildings so that EMS personnel, in the event that something unthinkable happens, don't have to take a stretcher up and down stairs, for instance, can go in a corridor wide enough to fit a stretcher, and have a place to park in a parking lot that's big enough to accommodate an ambulance should a woman experience an unfortunate circumstance in an abortion clinic, which has been known to happen.
Just to conclude quickly, the legislature was wrong in requiring these centers to be classified as hospitals. It was bad policy then, it's bad policy now. It makes access to health care for women harder. It makes health care for women more expensive, and we have an opportunity to change it.
Move to report.
Substitute motion to PBI. So moved second at 11:16, the PBI, clerk will call the roll.
Senator Samuel. Senator Lucas. Senator Howe. Senator Newman. Senator Blevins. Senator Lott. Senator Barker.
No.
Senator Norman.
No.
Senator Miller.
No.
Senator Smith.
Aye.
Senator Waters.
Aye.
Senator Black.
Aye.
Senator Carrigan.
Aye.
Senator Garrett.
Aye.
Senator Martin.
Aye, the bill is PBI 87. Is there a motion on 11:15?
Move to report.
Chairman, move the PBI.
So I move the second, the bill be reported, substitute motion that it will be PBI. The clerk will call the roll. Is there any objection to being reflected in the same votes as the last? Any objection? It is so reflected, the bill is PBI 87.